The story of India's fight for independence begins in the backdrop of British colonial rule. Our journey takes us back to the vibrant, diverse, and complex tapestry of the Indian subcontinent in the 17th century. A new player enters the scene, the British East India Company. Originally arriving in India in the early 1600s for trade, it gradually weaved its web of control over the Indian territories. A concoction of diplomacy, warfare, and economic manipulation led to the consolidation of the company's rule. By the mid-18th century, the British East India Company had become a formidable power, overshadowing traditional Indian rulers and establishing its rule across vast tracts of the Indian subcontinent. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 marked a significant turning point, paving the way for the company's political supremacy. The year 1858 was a watershed moment in India's history. Following the rebellion of 1857, also known as India's First War of Independence, the British Crown officially took over the reins from the British East India Company, imposing direct colonial rule. This marked the beginning of an era that would last for nearly 90 years. The socio-economic impact of British rule on India was profound. India's wealth was systematically exploited, its resources drained to fuel the growth of Britain's own industrial revolution. The introduction of new systems and policies, such as the railways and the education system, brought about a significant transformation in the Indian society, but it was a change brought about by coercion rather than consent. The British rule also sowed the seeds of discontent. The oppressive policies and the blatant disregard for the welfare of the Indian populace led to widespread resentment. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, this resentment began to crystallize into a strong sentiment for self-rule. The stage was set. The actors were ready. The Indian subcontinent, at the dawn of the 20th century, was a simmering cauldron of aspiration, anticipation, and determination. A storm was brewing, a storm that would shake the very foundations of the British Empire in India. By the 20th century, a strong sentiment for self-rule was brewing among the Indian populace, setting the stage for the fight for independence. The dawn of the 20th century saw the rise of Indian nationalism. This was a period of flourishing intellectual and political activity, a time when the seeds of independence were being sown. The formation of the Indian National Congress in 1885 marks a significant milestone in this journey. This platform brought together different voices from across the subcontinent, united by the common goal of self-governance. The Congress started as a moderate political organization, focusing on constitutional reforms and advocating for greater representation of Indians in the legislative processes. Meanwhile, the Muslim League came into existence in 1906. It sought to protect the rights of the Muslim community in a predominantly Hindu India, and eventually became a strong advocate for the creation of a separate Muslim state. As the political consciousness grew, so did the divisions within the Indian National Congress. The moderates, with their belief in gradual reform, found themselves at odds with the extremists, who sought immediate and complete independence from British rule. The moderates favored negotiation and dialogue with the British, while the extremists were more inclined towards direct action and confrontation. This division, however, only highlighted the diversity of the freedom movement. It was a testament to the fact that the struggle for independence was not a monolithic entity, but a vibrant and dynamic movement that accommodated a range of philosophies and strategies. The early 20th century was a time of political awakening and organization. It was a time when the voices of dissent started echoing louder in the corridors of power. The Indian National Congress and the Muslim League, the moderates and the extremists, all played their part in shaping the course of the freedom movement. The stage was set for a long struggle that would involve both peaceful protests and radical actions. The birth of Indian nationalism was not just an ideological shift, but a commitment to the dream of a free and sovereign India. The journey towards this dream was long, filled with sacrifices and hardships, but it was a journey the people of India had chosen to undertake. In 1920, Mahatma Gandhi launched the non-cooperation movement. This was a significant turning point in the Indian struggle for freedom. It was a strategic shift from the earlier moderate approach of polite petitions and appeals to the British authorities. Gandhi, with his philosophy of satyagraha and non-violence, brought a new dimension to the freedom struggle. Satyagraha, a term coined by Gandhi himself, translates to insistence on truth. It was a method of protest that involved non-violent resistance to injustice. Satyagraha was not merely a passive state, but an active pursuit of truth through love and non-violence. It was a call to the masses to stand up for their rights, not through violence, but through peaceful civil disobedience. The non-cooperation movement was a reflection of this philosophy. It involved the mass boycott of British goods, institutions, and even the courts and schools. Indian citizens were encouraged to spin their own cloth, shunning the British textiles. The idea was to cripple the British economy in India and to assert India's self-reliance. The participation in the non-cooperation movement was widespread. It wasn't limited to the educated elite in the cities. The movement reached the far-flung villages of India, stirring a sense of nationalism among the masses. It was the first time in Indian history that such a large number of people, cutting across caste, class, and religious lines, united in a common cause. However, the non-cooperation movement was abruptly called off in 1922 following an incident of violence in Chauri Chaura, a small town in Uttar Pradesh. Gandhi, a staunch believer in non-violence, was deeply disturbed by the incident and decided to halt the movement. Though the movement was called off in 1922, it marked the beginning of mass movements against British rule. The non-cooperation movement was a testament to the power of the people when united in a peaceful struggle for justice. It was a significant chapter in the Indian fight for independence, setting the stage for many more mass movements to follow. Following a period of relative calm, the struggle for independence reignited with the Civil Disobedience Movement in 1930. It was a time of renewed vigor and determination, a time when the Indian populace decided to take a stand against the oppressive British rule. At the heart of this movement was the Salt March, a non-violent protest led by none other than Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, popularly known as Mahatma Gandhi. The march was a direct response to the British monopoly on the salt trade, a commodity as essential as it was ubiquitous. Gandhi and his followers embarked on a 240-mile journey to the Arabian Sea, where they planned to make their own salt, thereby defying the oppressive salt tax imposed by the British. But this march was more than just a protest against a tax. It was a bold statement, a declaration of self-reliance and a call to action. Gandhi's march inspired millions across the nation to follow suit, leading to widespread acts of civil disobedience. Many began making their own salt while others refused to pay taxes. The British reacted with force, arresting thousands of protesters, including Gandhi himself. But the damage had been done. The Civil Disobedience Movement, with its simple act of making salt, had managed to shake the very foundations of the British Empire. It was a clear demonstration of the power of non-violent resistance and the collective strength of a united populace. It was a movement that transcended social and economic boundaries, uniting the nation in a common cause. The British administration was significantly shaken. They had underestimated the resolve of the Indian people, their thirst for freedom, and their capacity for peaceful resistance. The Civil Disobedience Movement, in its own unique way, had managed to hit the British where it hurt the most, challenging their authority and questioning their legitimacy. The Civil Disobedience Movement significantly shook the British administration, paving the way for further mass movements. It was a pivotal moment in India's struggle for independence, a moment that showed the world the power of peaceful protest and the indomitable spirit of the Indian people. As World War II raged, the Indian independence struggle reached a decisive phase with the Quit India movement in 1942. The world was embroiled in conflict, but India seized this moment to escalate its fight for freedom. The Indian National Congress, the leading political force of the time, issued a clarion call for do or die, immediate and complete independence from British rule. This call was not a mere slogan. It was a powerful plea that resonated with millions across the country. From the bustling cities to the quiet villages, people of all walks of life rallied behind this call, sparking widespread protests and strikes. The British rulers, already stretched thin by the global war, found themselves facing an internal struggle of monumental proportions. The Quit India movement was not just a political maneuver, it was a people's revolution, a wave of civil resistance that swept across the nation. However, the British response was swift and severe. They launched a brutal crackdown on the movement, arresting thousands of protesters and leaders. The Indian National Congress was declared illegal. Its leaders, including Mahatma Gandhi, were imprisoned without trial. The British hoped to quell the movement with their show of force, but the spirit of the Indian people was not so easily crushed. The Quit India movement did not achieve immediate independence. It was suppressed, its leaders were jailed, and yet it was far from a failure. It marked a significant turning point in the fight for independence. It demonstrated to the world, and more importantly to the British, the depth of India's desire for freedom. The movement laid bare the untenable nature of British rule, setting the stage for the eventual withdrawal of the British in 1947. Despite its suppression, the Quit India movement marked a significant turning point in the fight for independence. It was a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Indian people, a spirit that would ultimately lead to the dawn of a free India. Post-World War II, the British were increasingly unable to maintain their colonial rule over India. Exhausted and weakened, they were forced to acknowledge the inevitable. India was on the brink of independence. Negotiations for independence were complex and fraught with tension. As the tides of change swept over the subcontinent, two figures emerged at the forefront of these negotiations: Jawaharlal Nehru, the charismatic leader of the Indian National Congress, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the astute and determined leader of the Muslim League. Nehru, a passionate advocate for a united secular India, clashed with Jinnah's vision of a separate nation for Muslims. Their conflicting ideologies and the deep-seated communal tensions between Hindus and Muslims led to a bitter and divisive solution: the partition of India. The British, keen to expedite their exit, hastily agreed to the partition plan. This decision, taken with little regard for the human cost, resulted in one of the largest forced migrations in history. Millions of Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs were uprooted from their homes, triggering a wave of violence and bloodshed. However, amidst this chaos and confusion, a momentous event took place. At the stroke of midnight on August 15, 1947, India awoke to life and freedom. The reins of power were transferred from the British to the Indian leaders. Nehru's stirring speech, "Tryst with Destiny," echoed through the halls of Parliament, marking the birth of an independent India. Simultaneously, a new nation was carved out of India's western and eastern flanks. Pakistan, envisioned as a homeland for Muslims, was born. Jinnah, its first Governor-General, pledged to build a progressive and inclusive state. Thus, after a long and arduous struggle, India gained its independence, albeit with the painful reality of partition. This marked not only the end of colonial rule, but also the beginning of a new chapter in the subcontinent's history. A chapter filled with hope, challenges, and the promise of self-determination. The fight for India's independence was a saga of courage, resilience, and sacrifice. It was a journey marked by the sweat and blood of countless individuals who dared to dream of a free India. Let's take a moment to acknowledge the key figures of this monumental struggle. Mahatma Gandhi, a man who became the very embodiment of non-violence and civil disobedience. His philosophy of satyagraha, or truth force, became the cornerstone of the fight against oppression. Jawaharlal Nehru, with his vision for a modern India, and Subhas Chandra Bose, with his impassioned call for complete freedom, were other luminaries who guided the nation towards its destiny. These leaders were not alone. They were joined by countless others, men and women, young and old, who rallied behind the call for freedom. Names like Bhagat Singh, Rani Lakshmi Bai, and Bal Gangadhar Tilak, among others, became symbols of the struggle, their stories inspiring generations of Indians. As we reflect on the legacy of this fight, we see its impact etched deep into the fabric of modern India. The values of democracy, secularism, and equality enshrined in the Indian Constitution are a direct outcome of this struggle. The fight for independence was not just about breaking free from colonial rule, it was about envisioning and creating a new India, an India that respects diversity, champions human rights, and fosters development. Today, the spirit of the independence struggle continues to guide India. It is seen in the country's efforts to eradicate poverty, to promote education, and to ensure justice for all. It is seen in the vibrant diversity of its culture, in the resilience of its people, and in their continued quest for progress. The fight for India's independence was a saga of courage, resilience, and sacrifice. It was a struggle that shaped the destiny of a nation and left an indelible mark on the annals of history. India's fight for independence is a testament to the indomitable spirit of its people and their quest for self-rule. It is a story that continues to inspire, to motivate, and to remind us of the power of unity in the face of adversity. The struggle for India's independence was a monumental chapter in its history. Let's take a moment to revisit the key points discussed in this video. The birth of nationalism in India marked the first significant stride towards independence. This period saw the emergence of dynamic leaders who dared to challenge the colonial regime, empowering the masses to envision a unified, independent nation. The non-cooperation movement was a milestone in this journey. By refusing to adhere to the imposed colonial rules, Indians expressed their discontent with British rule. This peaceful rebellion resonated with the spirit of the nation, making it a powerful tool in the struggle for independence. Next, the Civil Disobedience Movement marked a shift in the fight for independence. Under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, Indians openly defied the British laws. This movement was not just significant for its impact on the colonial regime, but also for the way it brought together diverse sections of Indian society united in their common cause. Then came the Quit India movement, a call to the British to leave India. This movement marked a climax in the long struggle for independence, with widespread participation from the Indian population. It was a powerful assertion of the Indian will for self-governance. Finally, the journey towards independence and the subsequent partition of India into two nations was a period of mixed emotions. Joy at the attainment of freedom was juxtaposed with the sorrow of a nation divided. Reflecting on this struggle, we can see that the path to independence was fraught with challenges requiring immense courage, determination, and sacrifice from the Indian people. Remembering this struggle allows us to appreciate the freedom we enjoy today and serves as a reminder of the importance of safeguarding this freedom for future generations.